Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to BTR conference, E2 session on travel behavior, equity, and emerging mobility patterns. So today we have 6 exciting presentations to explore topics from household level, time allocation, gender travel behavior to electric vehicle charging challenges, rural mobility, and involving interplay between travel and daily activities. So without further ado, maybe we can invite our first speaker, Namrata Ghosh. She is a PhD candidate from Queensland University of Technology. Namrata's research focuses on transport equity and gendered travel behavior. And today she will share her insight on analyzing daily travel time allocation between partners in dual earner households. So it's a very interesting topic. So can you share your screen, Namrata?
Yes. Is it visible?
Sure. Yeah, we can see your slide.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. I am Namrata, and I'm doing my PhD research at QUT. And I will be sharing some initial findings from our research. And this study has been co-authored with Dr. Shamsunahar Yasmin. Before I start presenting, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Tubal and the Gyogara people, the First Nation owners of the lands on which QUT now stands. Before I begin, I also like to acknowledge that this research has been supported by, funded by the QUT Postgraduate Scholarship, and the database is provided by Queensland Department of Transport and Main Roads. So before I begin, I want to clarify some of the terms that I will be using in this presentation. So I will use men and women when discussing the literature findings and male and female when referring to the data set. This study focuses specifically on heterosexual cohabiting dual learner couples based on the structure of the available data. Same-sex and other household types are not included. This framing is not meant to reinforce binary or heteronormative assumption. Instead, it highlights the urgent need of more inclusive data collection that reflects full spectrums of gender identities and household forms. So let's move into why the study matters. To understand why this study matters, we need to recognize a shift. That is, dual earner households are now the norm, not the exceptions, in both developed and developing countries. As more women are entering into the paid work, partners in the dual earner households are coordinating their jobs, caregiving, and other travel activities within the shared time constraint and the resources. Yet much of our transport research still assumes a single earner model. This study asks who gets to travel farther or faster and why. Travel time in these households is not just an independent choice, it's shaped by the household capabilities. Building on that, the study takes a closer look on the interrelated factors shaping the total travel time in the dual earner household. This includes the partner-specific attributes for example, their own age, what type of job they are doing, their personal income, and what type of work flexibility they do have. Household level factors like how many dependents, like children, elders they have, and who has the car access. And the spatial factors like transport options and the geographic settings where their household is located for both male and female partners. Together, they influence how the travel time is distributed between the partners, and often it sometimes is unequal. This would lead to imbalances in time poverty, reduced participation in jobs and social activities, especially this is observed among women. So now that we have looked into the major factors that shaping the travel time, we let's turn to why total travel time is the main travel behavior indicator we are focusing on this study. So in dual earner households, the travel time is an outcome of the complex negotiation. It reflects how partners make their travel decision in terms of the mode choices they are going to use, the kinds of trips they take, and when they are traveling. These aren't isolated choices, they are shaped by interdependency that is already discussed in the previous slide. So that's why understanding how travel time is distributed among female and male partners is critical for designing policies that support household level, not just individual efficiency. So let me brief summarize what existing research already tells us. So the empirical evidence shows that dual earners couples spend 25 to 40% more travel time each day than a single earner or a single adult household. This is largely due to the need of coordinating work and other responsibilities across two working adults. Studies also consistently show that in this dual earner households, men typically commute longer, possibly because of their higher job status, better spatial job matching, or they have the priority access to the household vehicle. So even when both partners are employed, women bear the large share of the non-work travel, adding to the overall time burden. What's often missed in these travel patterns are not made in isolation. So the research gaps that remains is first, there is a limited empirical work that examines the total travel time allocation for each partners across all trips within a dual earner household. Most studies still focus on the commute trips. And secondly, the traditional transport models often treat household members as independent decision makers. So this masks the negotiated interdependent nature of travel time decisions that actually happen within the shared household. Therefore, there is an urgent need of partner disaggregated modeling that can uncover the differences of travel burdens in the same household. Finally, many of the existing literature theorizes that how individual household and spatial capability constraints influence the travel time allocation. This constraint shapes what people are able to do with their time, not just that what they choose to. So what happens if we continue to overlook this intra-household dynamics? First, the unequal distribution of travel time between the partners doesn't just affect individual routines. It has ripple effects that can constrain economic growth and limit the full potential of human capital, especially for the women. Second, when transport models ignored the household in the household level travel time, they rely on assumptions of independent choices. Third, this would oversight policy silence. So, without recognizing the intra-household dynamics, demand management strategies risk being gender insensitive and inequitable. And also, the cumulative time burden on women contributes to lower labor market participation, missed career opportunity, and restrictive access. So, finally, if it is not disaggregated by the partner, it becomes an invisible barrier. To address the research gaps, this study draws on two key theoretical frameworks, Amartya Sen's capability approach and household responsibility hypothesis. So in this study, we treat travel time not just as a cost or a constraint, but a critical outcome that either enables or restricts participation in economic and social travel activities. The capability approach theory helps us to ask important question. Even when household resources are shared, do both partners have the equal ability to convert those resources into equal travel outcomes? The answer often is no, because it depends on different conversion factors shaped by their gender roles, the spatial context, and the life stage responsibilities. So this framing helps us to see that equal resources do not imply equal outcomes. Guided by this conceptual lens, the focus of this study is to investigate the underlying mechanism that influence how total travel time is distributed between male and female partners. The study focuses on the Southeast Queensland region, shown here on the map. So for this study, we have used the Southeast Queensland Household Travel Survey. The survey data provides travel characteristics, household composition, and individual partner attributes. And this data set is integrated by additional data layers, that is accessibility measures, socio-demographic indicators, and built environment data. From this integrated data set, we extracted over 5,600 trip records of the dual earner couples. And from this, for estimation, we randomly selected 2,100 trips each for male and female uh, uh, partners from within the same household. So to analyze, we applied a linear regression framework, and our dependent variable is the natural logarithm of total travel time. And we estimate separate models for male and female initially, and to see that how each factors contribute to travel time. Estimation is done using maximum likelihood estimation in the Gauss software. So before moving into the empirical findings, let's look into the descriptive. As you can see here, male partners spend more time traveling overall compared to female partners. The difference is especially pronounced in work-related travel. However, when we look into maintenance, leisure, and other trips, the time distribution is more balanced across gender. So now the discussing the empirical findings. So in this chart, we see that the green bars indicate whether the factors that increase the travel time, and the red bar shows those that reduces the travel time. So few notable findings that I will discuss is that evening off-peak trips are associated with reduced total travel time. Female partners in the age of 30 to 39 are likely to spend longer duration, and travel time is lower among women aged 60 to 69. Potentially, they are reflecting more localized routing or fewer time insensitive obligations. We see that female partners working in the male-dominated industries associated with significantly longer travel time, pointing possibly to spatial job mismatches or less flexibility. And female partners living in the red line or having teenage children is associated with higher travel time, highlighting both spatial disadvantage and intensified household coordination demand. However, when we look into the built environment features, it shows mixed effect. Greater land use mix and bikeway density are associated with shorter travel time, confirming the benefits of compact multimodal environment. Interestingly, better walkability to maintenance services is associated with longer travel time, suggesting that they are still time intensive even when physically accessible. These findings reflect how individual characteristics, the spatial context, and the caregiving roles shape the total travel time. Now, turning to male partners, we see trips starting in the early morning, and the PM peak are associated with longer travel duration, whereas when there is an evening off-peak trips, by contrast, are associated with shorter travel duration, highlighting the flexibility and possibly the reduced traffic exposure in that area. The travel time is higher among women working in the mixed industry sectors and those with the children, suggesting that household and occupational coordination. At the household context, land use mix, access to nearby bus stops, and proximity to work services via public transport significantly reduces. It points out to the role of spatial and infrastructural capability in the travel time. So coming to the research significance, reading The Second Shift by Early Hochschild reframed my understanding of travel time. So the book captures and introduces the metaphor of second shift, which means that the unpaid labor after formal work ends and it starts at home. That is caregiving, housework, and emotional load. If we again look into dual earner household, it also experiences the second shift. When we are looking into our theoretical lens, the capability approach, it's about whether individuals have the real freedom to choose how they are allocating their time across paid and unpaid spheres. So this book actually made me reflect on my own research that travel time is just not a metric travel behavior metric, but as a reflection of the conversion factors of individual, household, and the spatial uh, capabilities. Thus, the travel time becomes a critical lens to observe how these shifts manifest across a daily basis. So, coming to what is the implication? So, these are the initial findings which lay to the foundation of joint and recursive travel models, and that reflect how one partner travel decision can enable or constrain the other. In the future work, we will also expand this to examine trip-purpose specific models and test policy scenarios that simulate to the real-world interventions. Already, our initial results have pointed out the need of the gender equitable household aware interventions. For example, designing for job access around both earners, not just the primary earner. Expanding off peak transit and on site childcare services to match the real schedules. And incentivize remote and flexible work to reduce the household travel loads, and also support programs for women that is re-entering the workforce post caregiving, and redesign the shared mobility to uh, reflect the lives through pooled rides, family ride credits, and coordination focused services. So this policy would shift the focus from individual trips to more interconnected travel behavior, and where the travel demand strategies might respond to the realities of the interdependent lives. Thank you for your time. I am happy to discuss any questions or insights you may have.
Thanks for the presentation. There's a question in the chat box. Oh, two questions. So the first question, can you see the question? But maybe I repeat the question. So you mentioned walking density increases travel time in female model in your data sample. When you consider the travel time, is it only travel time related to one particular mode, such as public transport or private car?
Thank you for the question. Yes, so when I'm mentioning that walking density, I mean to see the network, the walkability density, not by the mode. So it's not accessibility by walking, but more of if the area has more walkable density, the infrastructure around the area. If I am clear about answer the question.
Okay, thanks. The second question from Kara. I wonder if India and other nations in Eastern Hemisphere had a time use survey like ATUS. Perhaps she can share the hours per week the men versus women work at home for the household and elsewhere.
Yes, for the first question, I am from India, and but I am not sure as I have worked over there till now. We do not have a comprehensive household travel data set in India, and for I have used it for Australia's Queensland household travel data set. And then next question is share the hours per week the men versus women work at home for the household and elsewhere. Yes, as I have said, this is the initial modeling that we have done, but we will definitely incorporate those variables as well when we will be working on the joint and the recursive modeling.
Okay, I think we just spent 20 minutes for the first talk, and it's a very interesting topic. And thanks for the presentation again. We can proceed to the next speaker. University of Melbourne, are you here? Isra?
Yes.
Oh,
yes, I'm here.
So let me first introduce the speaker. Isra is currently a third-year PhD student under the Infrastructure Engineering Department at the University of Melbourne. Her research focuses on accessibility to electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Today, she'll presenting a paper on charging dissonance as part of her PhD thesis. So her presentation title is Charging Dissonance, exploring how renter multi-unit dwelling residents navigate limited charging access. So let's welcome our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. Can you hear me? All good?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. As the moderator mentioned, I'll be presenting to you one paper from my PhD on electric vehicle charging dissonance. This is co-written with my supervisors at the University of Melbourne and in collaboration with the University College London as well. Just a brief background, charging infrastructure deployment strategies have often relied on data from early electric vehicle adopters. However, this approach might be overlooking later adopters facing distinct challenges, such as renters and multi-unit dwelling residents. And so in this paper, we focus on these target users. Renters and multi-unit dwelling residents often lack access to residential charging due to complications such as multiple decision makers making request and approval processes complex, as well as electrical infrastructure and parking arrangements that make charging setup complicated. And because of these challenges, they might have to adapt to limited charging access, such as, for example, relying on more distant public charging stations, or perhaps they need to adapt by adjusting how they travel, potentially leading to limited mobility. Their adaptive strategies may manifest in the discrepancy between their preferred charging locations, times, and manner, and their actual charging behavior. And so this mismatch between what users want and what they actually do is represented by what we call as EV charging dissonance. We define this concept as the state where users' attitudes towards EV charging conflict with their charging behavior, and this is drawn from the cognitive dissonance theory. We also know that charging enables users to maintain mobility and access desired activities. So what this means is that users' goal is actually to participate in activities that are outside their homes and not merely to charge their car. And so given these relationship between charging and activity access, we also suggest that charging dissonance may influence activity participation and lead to other travel-related dissonances. In this paper, our goal is to provide a deeper understanding of this concept of charging dissonance by exploring how renters and multi-unit dwelling residents navigate limited charging access. And we do so by first understanding when does charging dissonance occur, what do users do about it, and also what are the consequences of their responses in terms of reducing dissonance and in how they could potentially still access their desired activities. To achieve our aim, we do 7 focus groups with EV and non-EV owners from Victoria, Australia. So what did we find? Our first cause of charging dissonance is the lack of home charging access, which mismatches with users' desire for home charging. And for renters and multi-unit dwelling residents, this remains a challenge for them, leading them to heavily rely on public charging stations. We also find that certain circumstances may exacerbate their charging dissonance, such as having a kid who doesn't really want to sit around and wait in a public charging station, or if users have busy lifestyles, similar to what the first presenter mentioned as to how they would have engagements with their households or even strict work commitments. We also find that charging dissonance may occur due to the need to deliberately and carefully plan for travel. So while home charging allows users to seamlessly integrate EV charging into their routines, public charging often requires users to ask how they can fit EV charging within their week fairly easily, or when will they have time to sit around in a public charging station and wait for their cars to charge, especially when they do this in isolation of other activities. Another cause is the perceived need for frequent charging, or what literature mentions as range anxiety. And this is particularly evident among prospective EV owners who don't really want to be stuck in the middle of nowhere. Interestingly, our findings reveal that current EV owners report diminished range anxiety the more that they have experience with their EVs. And we find that a key factor to this reduced range anxiety may be the increased awareness of charging opportunities. As one of our respondents mentioned, it's like a frequency illusion where if you've just bought a red car, then on the road you're going to be more aware of different red cars. Similar to if you have an electric vehicle, then you might be also more aware of where the charging stations are located. And lastly, there's also dissonance when the expected charging service quality mismatches with users' challenges with experience of charging process. So, for example, there might be discrepancies between the marketed and actual charging speed, unreliable chargers, or issues with plug compatibility. And particularly for prospective EV owners, these issues with public charging challenges can deter their EV adoption, potentially signaling also travel mode dissonance. While we also have other respondents that express less concerns about public charging, and we find that this underestimation of practical charging challenges may suggest lower levels of anticipated charging dissonance. Now we move to what do users do in response to experiencing or anticipating charging dissonance. We find that users could change their situation, charging behavior, activity travel behavior, and sometimes they would also change their attitudes. An example of changing situation is that other users would install charging equipment in their infrastructure, but as mentioned earlier, some of these users face challenges, especially when there's resistance from other unit owners, given that in a multi-unit dwelling, different unit owners would have a say in the decision-making processes. So that hinders the installation of charging equipment for some of our respondents. Other workarounds that is under the change situation type of response is also curbside charging, where some users would run an extension cord on the footpath and then they would plug in their car there, while others would anticipate looking for buildings that would already have charging facilities. And this is particularly evident for renters who are considering charging in their next move. When home charging is infeasible, given the constraints I mentioned earlier, respondents would rely on less preferred charging stations, such as on fast public charging that may be more costly. Others would also rely on workplace charging as well as charging facilities at destinations. For the change activity travel behavior type of response, we find that users would relocate planned activities, such as they would do their work emails or work calls while waiting for their cars to charge in public charging station. Others would also engage in non-mandatory activities like shopping and dining, where they would induce activity engagement just to fill the wait time to make it productive that they're still waiting for their cars to charge. We also find that others would change their intended destination, where they might go to a different destination that would already have charging facilities as opposed to their original desired destination. Some respondents also mentioned inducing out-of-home trips just for the sole purpose of charging and careful planning of simultaneous activities while charging. Similar here to a quote from our respondents who mentioned they would think about what they're going to do if they have to charge for more than 2 hours. So perhaps they'll take their dogs with them or go for a walk. And these strategies seem to mirror those that are used to reduce travel time disutility, such as how we would work on our laptops or watch videos while on the phone while traveling on a bus or on a train, which suggests that there might be parallels between charging time and travel time management. Other modifications to travel plans include time-shifting planned activities to accommodate more desirable charging conditions. Others would also adapt their lifestyles, where we have a respondent they had to move their car late at night from a public charging spot to their secure private spot. And others would anticipate as well trip delays and trip curtailment, especially when they experience range anxiety. Lastly, we find that users would change their attitudes by rationalizing behavioral changes. So some EV owners would mention that they don't really mind public charging and it's not an inconvenience because they would compare this with the broader benefits of EV ownership. And so we find that there's this increased tolerance for potential inconveniences related to EV use. So this might mean that EV adopters may be weighing immediate challenges against perceived long-term benefits. We also had a look at, after considering all the responses that users do when they experience or anticipate dissonance, we evaluated which among these are effective in reducing EV charging dissonance, and we find that changing situation and charging behavior seem to be the effective responses, whereas changing activity, travel behavior, and attitudes seem to reflect coping mechanisms that underlie that there should be improvements with how we provide charging services. We also looked at what are the impacts of these responses, and we find that trip delays and also cancellation may be signaling potential activity participation dissonance, where users might have challenges or may be unable to engage in the out-of-home activities that they would want to go to because of the charging challenges that they would anticipate or experience. And so, given all that, what can we learn from it? So, these are the implications of our studies. We find that yes, home charging is important, but not just because of its convenience, but because it can mitigate the deliberate trip planning needs and range anxiety. We also learned that users effectively adapt by multitasking while charging, but perhaps these strategies are only effective for people with flexible schedules. And so, what we can learn from this is that providing charging with amenities that facilitate activity engagement, or perhaps we should be providing these charging stations nearby already existing activities, which what we call as activity-oriented charging distribution. We also learned that users cope by shifting focus on EV ownership benefits rather than just the charging challenges and by making changes to their routines. So perhaps charging providers can provide apps with real-time information about charger characteristics and activity suggestions, and integrate charging planning with journey mappers to optimize routines and travels. And lastly, as we learned from the anticipated strategies of prospective EV owners, that relocation may be a dissonance reduction strategy. So future research can look into the effects of charging facilities on residential location choice, especially for renters. In conclusion, our study introduced and provided evidence of the concept of charging dissonance, which is the misalignment between EV charging attitudes and behaviors. And our key takeaway is the importance of providing charging facilities and services in ways that minimizes lifestyle disruptions. And we can do this by streamlining home charging in rentals and multi-unit dwellings, as well as activity-oriented planning with high service quality, particularly for public charging stations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the insightful presentation. We can open the floor for questions. There's the one question from Professor Kara Kochman.
I hear that rooftop solar is super easy in Australia and the nation may have some duck curve issues during daytime. I think it's best for grid if we charge midday and allow V1G management for this of the speed at which we charge max use of wind. Yes, we do have a lot of solar, and actually it's easiest to install solar and use solar for EV charging for standalone houses. And we find that for our target users here, which are renters and multi-unit dwelling residents, they're also facing challenges with solar installation, particularly with equitable distribution of the energy that are coming from the solar towards the unit owners. Because in Australia, we have this thing called lot liability or entitlement that some users are paying more depending on the size of the lots that they own. And so there's that equity challenge with using solar in multi-unit dwellings, particularly. But yes, considering the potential of EVs to be batteries as well, it could have that benefits of holding or storing energy during the midday to also flatten the duck curve and then use that energy potentially at the night peak hours time.
Any other questions? Okay, so if there's no further questions, may we proceed to the next speaker. The next speaker is Professor Michael Hyland from UC Irvine. Michael is an associate professor in civil and environmental engineering at University of California, Irvine. His research involved modeling and analyzing transportation systems with a focus on mobility innovation and how they will impact society. Michael, are you there? Okay,
I am
great.
here. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, can hear you. Thanks for joining the conference at your night time.
Yeah, happy to be here. Can you see the
Yeah, we can see your
presentation?
slides.
The good one. All right. Well, thanks for having me. I wasn't prepared to do this until about 2 hours ago. The first author here is Dr. soon-to-be Professor Young-Hoon Bak. He moved back to Korea on Sunday and is, as you might imagine, dealing with some challenges moving internationally. So I am very happy to be here and present our joint work. Title of the paper is Household Activity Pattern Problem with AV-Enabled Intermodal Trips. Motivation for this, maybe you've seen some similar uh, headlines that Waymo is planning to partner with Toyota on personal or personally owned robotaxis, robocars, basically what we call driverless vehicles. This is separate from Waymo's robotaxi business. This is where they're going to sell them to individual households. Whether this partnership goes anywhere, we'll see, but it's in the news recently. So the big questions that Young-Hoon and I, or Dr. Bach and I, are trying to tackle are the following, kind of two sets of questions. How will household-owned driverless vehicles change the way households travel? This isn't a new question. I think a number of us have been grappling this for over a decade, if not longer. But I think as more data is coming out and more thinking and more research on this topic, we hope we can make a useful contribution to answering that question. And then, households change their behavior. What are the implications of these changes on the transportation system? We're going to use vehicle miles traveled as our main performance metric in this analysis, but you can think about congestion and emissions as well. Okay, so that's the first set. The second set is, what is the best way to forecast changes in household travel and transportation system impacts from driverless vehicles? And really, I'm a modeler, so I'm going to use mathematical models to do that. What is the best way to model household level travel decisions for a future with driverless vehicles when these vehicles don't really exist yet at all? As far as I know, you cannot buy a personal driverless vehicle that can deadhead anywhere in your city and pick you up where you need to go. So we're working in a world without data on the actual technology we would like to analyze. I'm not following the chat, but I see there's like 5 comments, so please jump in if those are relevant to me. Okay, so what is this study about? Travel patterns of household-owned driverless vehicles. And we're going to use a mathematical programming model in order to try to describe the key components of household travel decisions. It's going to be a household activity travel pattern problem based vehicle routing and scheduling problem. For those of you who don't know the history of the HAP formulation, it came from Professor Recker here at UC Irvine, I guess 30 years ago now, and we'll get into some of the details a bit later. One of our contributions, in addition to incorporating automated driverless vehicles, which a couple others have done, is to model multimodal and intermodal travel options. So this is really helping or hoping to get at how automated vehicles and public transit can connect to each other, or how one can support the other. Or, it's mostly a model, so maybe AVs will cannibalize all transit usage. This paper was published in Part C somewhat recently. We have a recent extension we just submitted to TRB where we're modeling both conventional vehicles and automated vehicles in a household. But for this study, we're just going to assume households have automated vehicles. All right, so a little bit more introduction, but getting into some assumptions here. Household members, as we're assuming, and we think is quite realistic, are the members of the household are economically and socially interconnected, which means for most households, they have interrelated budgets and income and how they spend that money. And also they do a lot of activities together, even though many household members do activities separately as well. And household members share their privately owned or household owned vehicles. So these are key assumptions to the modeling framework. You can see two graphs here. Left-hand side is a household conducting activities with two vehicles, where the vehicles are conventional vehicles, non-automated. And on the right-hand side, we have the same households conducting the same activities, but with just one vehicle instead of two, but that vehicle is automated. And we'll get into some of the spatial aspects here, but you can see temporally there's more overlap and the vehicle was released from the household member and taking advantage of the deadheading of automation. All right. Let's see here. Also, please stop me. I don't even know what the my total time allotted is for this presentation. Again, apologies. I just heard about this 3 hours ago. Okay, so I asked the question, what's the best way to forecast changes in household travel when transportation system impacts from driverless vehicles? So I have kind of 3 items here. Survey experts or super forecasters. I think there's a couple papers that are published where just experts were asked what the implications of automated vehicles might be. And I think given the extreme uncertainty around driverless vehicles and how they could impact behavior, this is maybe not a bad alternative. We can do what a number of other researchers have done, which is tweak existing data-driven statistical models. So there's a trip-based 4-step model or even existing activity-based models as well. Keep a similar framework, forecast whether or not households own automated vehicles, try to take into account the constraints that are associated with automated vehicles and take away the constraints that are associated with conventional vehicles but not associated with automated vehicles. And the third is, of course, what we're going to do is develop models that focus really on the kind of physical and logical constraints associated with vehicle travel among household members. Yeah, we go that route. Okay, get that section. So I mentioned the original household activity pattern problem by Professor Will Recker here at UC Irvine. Models household vehicle usage and travel decisions as a pickup and delivery problem, which is an extension of the vehicle routing problem. But instead of picking up and dropping off packages, the household members use household vehicles to, quote unquote, pick up and drop off activities in space and return them back home. It's, I think, a very innovative way of modeling household travel decisions. All right. How are things going to change? Well, this is the conventional vehicle. We're talking about how things are going to change with automated vehicles. So we have the person going from their home location in green to a parking space in blue and then walking to their actual activity location. With automated vehicles, the vehicle can go directly from the home location to the activity location, at which point the vehicle probably can't park exactly at the activity location. So what can it do? It can go to the same parking lot it would have went to if it was a conventional vehicle or another one nearby. It can go back home, or it can go serve another household member. Right? So maybe that involves dropping off household member 1 and picking up household member 2 and taking them back home. Another thing that's mentioned in the literature is the vehicle can slowly cruise around near the activity location, thereby not paying for parking while the person conducts their 5, 15, 30, 60-minute activity. and ends up saving the household money, but of course increases VMT, congestion, emissions, and all the other negative externalities associated with using the roadway network. We're not going to focus on the cruising option, but we're going to have a model that captures the other three options. As I mentioned, we are interested in the intermodal aspects, so automated vehicles with transit. So some possible activity paths here or travel paths. The person can, of course, go directly from home to the work location or activity location. They can walk to the transit network, take the transit line to their activity location and to the final leg via walking. Or they can use a private automated driverless vehicle to travel to station one, and then from there, it's kind of not a park and ride or kiss and ride. Kiss the robot ride is what it's been termed in some locations, where the robot is, of course, the driverless vehicle. A person could go to station one or station two, which are, of course, intermodal trips, and then has the same relocating options, the vehicle does, that is, as if the vehicle drove the person directly to their activity location. So park nearby the transit station, go back home, or serve another household member. All right. So having two other studies that have embedded the kind of key aspects of automated vehicles or driverless vehicles in the HAP formulation, both from Kayati and Kang from SUNY Buffalo. So they consider AV's new travel patterns such as the empty vehicle repositioning, and then after the AV drops off the passengers, it can handle all three of these different repositioning deadheading behaviors. Okay. Yeah, the vehicle and the person can be separated, which is a key aspect here. And then a second study also incorporates shared automated vehicles. It's essentially this backup mode that you always have available to you in order to complete your activities if the household vehicle isn't available and the transit network is not very accessible for you for the trips you want to make. So the main limitation of the existing HAP-based models that incorporate automated vehicles is that they don't have transit networks at all, and no HAP models really have intermodal trips, park and ride, or kiss the robot ride. So that's the main contribution of our study here. All right. Assumes all of our household or privately owned vehicles are automated. Travelers can use automated vehicles, shared vehicles. We don't differentiate between automated and non-automated there, and public transit, as well as multi or intermodal trips. And we want these people to complete their activities within given time windows. So a key input are the activity locations and activity time windows. So for work, this is usually assumed to be a somewhat narrow time window, but for things like shopping, there's a wide time window. Essentially, you can do it from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. if the stores are open. All right. Let me hide my meeting controls here. All right, so this is top left, the original formulation of the HAP problem without automation. Top right-hand side is two other studies that do incorporate conventional vehicles with transit. Bottom left is household, the HAP problem with automated vehicles with no transit. And the bottom right is our formulation, which brings in automated vehicles as well as transit, as well as intermodal trips. And all of these households in these four pictures are completing the same three activities, just using very different modes as a function of the model. All right. So the problem formulation here, I'm not going to go into the mathematical formulation in details, but just give you a general sense of how we're trying to model this problem. So assumptions are that household members must complete all of their given activities. I mentioned already that they're economically and socially interconnected. And a key assumption, which is our objective function, is that all the household members collectively want to minimize their collective generalized travel costs. So travel, monetary cost, in-vehicle, out-of-vehicle travel times. We're going to take into account all of those factors. We'll assume the location of every household is given, as well as the location of every activity, and we have a time window associated with every activity as well. All right. So one nice attribute of this problem formulation is that we're modeling joint tour formation, mode choice, route choice together, and vehicle usage among household members, which is a key aspect. Okay, so we also assume not only people or households make their routing decisions, also parking locations as well to minimize their generalized travel cost. Okay, so there's kind of three key entities in the modeling formulation. There's the household members, there's the vehicles, and then the activities that need to be completed. We have something called activity nodes, which I'll get into more detail about here. These are all the different types of locations in the network. Each activity node, think about it in a graph, nodes and links in a graph, of course, corresponds to a physical node in the transportation network. But one physical node, you can think about it as the house, is going to be associated with actually many different activity nodes. And similarly, activity locations are also going to be, physical activity locations are going to be associated with multiple activity nodes. Decision variables, so we have our routing variables, the same as a vehicle routing problem. Does a vehicle or household member travel between node I and node J, or do they not? So that's a binary variable. We have temporal or scheduling variables. If there is a trip between these two nodes, when does it happen? When does the person arrive at the downstream node? We also have half dozen other variables that make sure we can properly take into account the parking constraints and vehicle occupancy constraints for the vehicles and the household travel decisions. A bunch of parameters in the model, travel times, distances, time windows, and then similar to a conventional statistical model, we have sensitivities to travel time, travel cost, transfers in the transit network, etc. And our objective function is to minimize this total generalized travel costs. Okay, I'm going to skip this for now. As I mentioned, yeah, we have a lot of decision variables here, routing variables for the vehicles, for the people. We have scheduling variables, again, for the vehicles and for the people. And then we have parking variables and vehicle occupancy variables as well. So the black variables here are the ones in the original HAP formulation. The two other studies incorporate the separation of the vehicles and the household members, which is the purple ones here. And then we, because we are incorporating transit and intermodal trips, are bringing in the red variables here to take into account all of the flexibility that automated vehicles allow. Okay. Yeah, I probably don't have a ton of time. So activity nodes, for every activity that a household needs to complete in a day, you take that number, you multiply it by 16, and that's how many nodes are in our graph. So if the household has 10 activities, you have 160 plus 1, 161 nodes in your activity graph, which you're going to solve a vehicle routing problem on top of. All right, so I'm going to get to some results here. This is the objective function, as I mentioned, all of these components of travel costs, monetary costs, travel times. 6 different sets of constraints. Spatial connectivity, temporal constraints, parking and relocation. We have spatial and temporal for both household members and the vehicles, and then coupling constraints that make sure that if a person is traveling in the network, they have to be using a mode to do that. Okay, so we have some really pretty graphs upcoming here. We're going to look at 3 fictitious households, and then we're going to look at a larger number of households in the San Diego region where this study is based off of. For the fictitious households, we built our own grid network. Let's see here. 2 freeway routes, 2 main transit lines, 9.6 by 8 kilometer network, the downtown area being 400 meter square blocks. We have 40 places where people can park, 50 activity locations, 17 transit stations, 50 residential zones, and a bunch of freeway and street nodes in our network. We solve our math programming formulation using Gurobi in the function in Python, and we solve the shortest path problems to build this network using NetworkX in Python. Get into the stopping criteria a little bit later. So an interesting question is whether or not what I'm describing is a descriptive model or a predictive model. I'll give this tongue-in-cheek quote from my colleague here at UC Irvine who says, it's a prescriptive model. You're optimizing what a household should do in terms of minimizing their generalized cost. But if we have an app in the future that solves this problem for them, well, then it becomes a descriptive model. I personally believe it's a descriptive model from scratch in the same way that we assume that households maximize their utility Here, we assume they can solve a complex optimization problem to minimize their household travel costs, which is essentially what they are doing every day when they're using their vehicles to get to their activity locations. They're solving this problem, even if they're not using mathematical programming to do it. Okay, so this is what the activity graph looks like on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side are the same trips, but shown on a physical network. So the home location is here in green on the left and here in green on the right. We have two persons conducting three activities and they own one automated vehicle. So you can see that the person with a vehicle, with an automated vehicle, goes to activity one, two people. One person gets off at this location. The automated vehicle continues to activity three, where it drops that person off. The vehicle deadheads back home. Then I think drops this person off, and I might have done that first, and then goes back to pick up this person. And then I think somehow it gets back home again. Yes, comes back home again and picks up this person right here and returns home. And that's what we're showing here on the right-hand side in the physical network as well. We have two other examples here. So more people, more activities. Now we have two automated vehicles. You can see this household doesn't use any transit, whereas household one actually used transit to get to this activity location. Household three, we can capture the case where the household doesn't own any automated vehicles, in which the household has to rely on transit and shared vehicles. So think Uber or Lyft type services. Okay, so some of the results, which are not obvious visually, is that vehicle ownership is the most critical factor in terms of household travel behavior. An additional automated vehicle for the household significantly increases the number of person trips that can be served by the household, not surprising. An additional automated vehicle substantially reduces both the travel time and the generalized travel cost of the households. One result that's not shown here because it depends on the case study area is that when you're looking at VMT, certainly going from 0 automated vehicles to 1 automated vehicle drastically increases number of vehicle miles traveled. But going from 1 automated vehicle to 2 automated vehicles doesn't necessarily increase that household's vehicle miles traveled. Because when you have one vehicle for multiple household members, it tends to do a lot of deadheading between the traveler's activity locations. Whereas if you have 2 automated vehicles for the household, there's less deadheading, even if more trips are served by automated vehicles. Okay, so case study 2, 200 households in the San Diego region. We have 2 scenarios in addition to our base network. We basically add more transit. What we're interested in here is, okay, you have automated vehicles. Let's build a robust transit network or quasi-robust transit network. How does that change behavior? And then scenario B is we keep the transit enhanced network, but we take away an automated vehicle from the household. How does that change behavior? So here are kind of the main results: baseline, scenario A, scenario B, excuse me. Not much changes when you add the transit enhanced network, but when you take away an automated vehicle, the number of person trips by automated vehicles does slightly decrease. In public transit, it slightly increases, but unsurprisingly, most people were still using their own household-owned automated vehicles. Generalized travel cost here, quite interesting. So don't read too much of the numbers, but rather the differences between the numbers. So you keep the same number of automated vehicles for the household, you add better transit, you get a minor decrease in household travel cost. You take away the automated vehicle, and you see about a 20% increase in the household travel costs. All right.
Hi, Michael. You have about 2 minutes left.
Okay, sounds good. I'm almost done. Thanks for interrupting me. I sincerely mean that. Thanks for interrupting me. Travel distance here. So we see with the baseline scenarios, large number of kilometers traveled, where you add the transit network in, slight decrease, you take away an automated vehicle. In this scenario, not all scenarios, we do see a decrease in vehicle kilometers traveled. I'll skip this chart in detail, but despite really trying to build a transit network with fast speeds, short wait times, such that people would be willing to transfer from their driverless vehicle to the transit network. A pretty small number of households are willing to use this option, maybe like 8 or 9 out of the 200, and the average travel cost reduction for these households is relatively small, which for those of you who might live in a place that's somewhat similar or care about a place that's somewhat similar to California and San Diego, this I think would be considered problematic in terms of keeping transit ridership reasonably high in a future with household-owned driverless vehicles. Okay. Yeah, just to say, the vehicles in our scenarios, because parking's cheap in San Diego, tend to not park at activity locations, but rather go back home and park in a lot of instances, which has the downside of increasing VMT, but has the upside of being able to repurpose space in dense urban areas for activities other than parking vehicles. All right, so conclusion. We formulate the HAP AV-IT that models travel decisions for a household with access to driverless vehicles. Only a few other studies try to model the key constraints that we're capturing here. I mentioned 2 of them that use the HAP framework, and there's 2 other ones that also use mathematical programming formulations. Ours is the first one to incorporate intermodal travel with household level AV routing and schedule decisions. We capture 5 possible mode choices. And as far as we know, this model represents a state of the art in terms of household level activity constrained travel in a future with driverless vehicles. Hopefully it's helpful to a number of stakeholders in terms of trying to think about, if not forecast, how driverless vehicles are going to change transit and roadway systems in the future. Limitations of the modeling framework. We assume the activity locations are fixed. Right now, we just relaxed this in our recent studies. We had hard time windows. And then maybe many of you caught on to this, but we assume the travel times of the network are exogenous. So even though we have much more VMT according to our model, we're not capturing right now the implications of that additional VMT on congestion. And I will leave it there.
All right, thanks for the presentation. There's a question from Cara in the chat box. Can you see the questions there?
I'm scrolling down now. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hi, Mike. Hi, Cara. Good to see you. I don't think any of us wants to allow private AVs to go empty, except in emergencies with very high distance fees penalties. I always tell policymakers that it should be 0 deadheading, and shared fleets, like Waymo and Apollo Go, should be held to 20% max empty or at a distance. This is feasible if you allow people to pool rides. I wouldn't go so far to say as no deadheading. I think what our results show is that this really can provide benefits to household in terms of their generalized travel cost. But I do share your implied, if not direct, concerns that if we do have these empty deadheading vehicles traveling all over our networks at all times of day and never parking, that's going to be a very bad outcome. Our transportation systems don't have that capacity to handle all this additional deadheading. I know folks have, you talk to economists and they say you don't need to price deadheading miles any differently than miles with 1 person or 2 persons in the vehicle. Naturally, people will respond to road user charges and congestion pricing by avoiding deadheading and putting more passengers in the vehicle. That's basically where I fall, although I think it might be necessary to discourage deadheading a little bit more stringently than what you might call a productive vehicle miles traveled from the vehicles. And yeah, I was a little concerned about the 20%. That's not what we're getting for the non-pooled studies, but you're right about if you do require pooling or incentivize pooling, you can get empty VMT, I think even below 20%.
Okay, so may I ask a follow-up question? So I'm curious how your model incorporates the cost of using automated vehicle, especially whether your AV cost was it treated as a fixed, dynamic, or user specific cost? For example, if you consider car sharing, ride hailing, the cost could be dynamic. or whether you consider, for example, whether the car is owned by the user or the car is shared. I think the car ownership will also affect the cost.
Yeah, so we call them household owned. So I own an automated vehicle that me and my family primarily use. The cost there, we just broke everything down on a per mile basis, right? So I don't know, maybe it might have been like 60 cents a mile, 70 cents a mile was what we ended up with for a driverless vehicle. And then we also had shared automated vehicles, robotaxis, choose your terminology there, where it's a fleet of vehicles, Waymo providing service to anyone who wants to use it. We had, I think, a substantially larger cost per mile, maybe $1.10 per mile there. No car sharing. We've had some discussions about sharing automated vehicles amongst 2 or 3 or 4 households. Maybe you live close to your family, maybe you have close friends who you'd be willing to share your own driverless vehicle with. That's on our back burner. We're not focusing on that right now, but we think in the future that could be interesting to look at.
I'm also interested in your finding. Did you find users, commuters, they prefer to use EV for a specific type of activities?
Short answer is no, because there's like no monetary value associated with the activities. The only thing that differentiates the activities besides their spatial location is their time windows. So we didn't look into that, but maybe the tight time windows associated with employment and other activities does correlate with driverless vehicle usage as opposed to transit, but we haven't looked at that yet. That's a good question. Thank you.
Thanks. We have another question in the chat box.
How you price deadheading miles?
Yeah.
So this would be the government that would be doing the pricing, and they would, as I said, economist perspective, they would just price the use of the roadway by vehicles, whether there's 0 persons in the vehicle, 1 person in the vehicle, 2 persons in the vehicle. You pay the same price for using, in our case, the 405 at 4:50 p.m. in the afternoon. That's going to be very expensive. Whereas if you use the same road at 11 p.m. at night, it's not going to be as expensive.
Right. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I think for those who are interested, they can follow up after the presentation. So maybe we can move to the next presenter. I'm very happy our presenter, Nisha Magna, is here, so we don't need to play the video. So Nisha, can you share your screen?
Yes, sure.
And I think you can present your 2 papers in sequence, then we come back for Q&A. How about that?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, sounds
Thank you.
good.
Nisha, you are muted. We can't hear you.
Hello, everyone. I am Nishatnila Meghna. I am a PhD candidate in Virginia Tech. Today, I'm going to present my research, which is named Activity Type Choice Behavior of Students, Insights from Dynamic Discrete Choice and Tour-Based Modeling Framework. In this research, I actually investigated the activity type choice pattern of post-secondary students in a tour-based approach. There are some limitations of the existing studies. Traditional models oversimplify how students actually choose activities during their trips and how the different activities are connected. For example, if someone chooses TA or RA work in their first trip, but recreation in their second trip, the main tour activity being TA or RA work, this is how traditional models oversimplify and do not consider the interconnectivity among the activities. They also fail to capture the way past activities actually influence future choices. To address these gaps, this study introduces a tour-based model that better captures student travel patterns. It examines how students decide on different activities within 2 and 3 tip tours using models like multinomial logit model, nested logit model, mixed logit model, dynamic discrete choice model, and dynamic discrete mixed choice model to provide more accurate understanding of the decision-making process. My research is based on the Student Move Toronto survey that collects information on how post-secondary students in Greater Toronto and Hamilton area travel and choose their activities. Student Move Toronto is the largest and most detailed survey solely on student travel patterns in this region. Greater Toronto and Hamilton area consist of 6 cities, and among them, Toronto is the most populous metropolitan area in Canada. Students in Greater Toronto and Hamilton area make up over 600,000 people who travel daily across a region of 8,298.6 square kilometer, both in urban and suburban campuses. The survey was divided into 4 key sections. I mostly focused on personal and trip information and some household level information. I excluded the incomplete records and removed the outliers and took necessary information for my research. I used a Google Application Programming Interface based framework. This Google Application Programming Interface can generate a relatively large number of travel time and distance matrices for any origin destination pair. The level of service values are calculated based on the respondents' exact origin destination pairs and departure times. Also, TILOs can differentiate between a trip starting at 7 a.m. and one starting at 8 a.m. For transit trips, the level of service generates excess time, wait time, in-vehicle travel time, transfer time, and regress time for each trip. After analyzing the data, I found that over 65% of students engaged in 2 trip and 3 tip tours. Key findings indicate that driving costs are higher for 2 trip tours compared to 3 tip tours, while transit costs are slightly lower in 3 tip tours. The analysis of travel time and activity duration revealed that students in 2 trip tours spend more time traveling to activities compared to those in 3 tip tours. Also, the first activity usually the longest in both tour types. I used 3 modeling techniques for 2 trip tours, such as multinomial logit model, nested logit model, and mixed logit model. And I used 2 models such as dynamic discrete choice model and dynamic discrete mixed choice model for 3 tip tours. This is the multinomial logit model structure for my activity type choices. I had 12 different types of activities. Multinomial logit model assumes that decision makers choose the alternative with the highest utility and follow the irrelevant alternatives property, meaning that the relative probability of choosing between 2 alternatives is independent of the presence or absence of other alternatives in the choice set. The utility function for an activity I is shown here. This is the nested logit model structure. The non-work activity nest groups activities like restaurant visits, shopping, visiting friends and family, and recreation. The nested logit model improves upon the multinomial logit model by using correlations among similar alternatives, addressing the independence of irrelevant alternatives assumption in multinomial logit model by grouping alternatives into nests. Choices within a nest are more likely to be substituted with each other rather than with alternatives outside the nest. It reduces bias in choice probability estimation compared to multinomial logit model. These are the two equations for probability of choosing an activity within the nest and outside the nest. The mixed logit model is a flexible econometric model used in discrete choice analysis that overcomes the limitation of multinomial logit model by introducing random variation of preferences across individuals. The core idea of mixed logit model is that individual preferences are not identical across the population. Instead of assuming that all individuals have the same response to factors like travel time, cost, etc., the mixed logit model actually introduces random components to capture these variations. This means that each person may weight factors differently. Unlike multinomial logit model, mixed logit model can model situations where individuals make repeated choices. Uh, the dynamic discrete choice model is an advanced econometric model used to analyze decision making over time by introducing a state transition and long-term planning. Standard discrete choice models assume decisions are made independently at each time step. DDCM assumes that different choices influence future choices. Individuals select an option that maximizes total expected utility, considering both the immediate benefit of the chosen action and the long-term impact of the choice on future decision making. The dynamic discrete mixed choice models combines elements of both DDCM and the mixed logit model to capture both sequential decision making and individual preference heterogeneity. Unlike standard DDCM and DDMCM, unlike standard DDCMs, the DDMCM introduces individual specific differences in preferences by introducing a random component in utility. These are also the equation of dynamic discrete mixed choice model. These are the model outcome of MNL, NL, and mixed logit model. Since the table is overwhelming with data, I will describe the summary key findings in the model results section. This slide presents the key findings from the multinomial logit model and nested logit models in analyzing activity type choices. Both models indicate that distance, cost, and time negatively impact activity selection, meaning that higher travel costs and longer durations make individuals less likely to choose certain activities. In multinomial logit model, daycare and health-related activities have the lowest preference, while shopping and work locations are the most preferred choices. Part-time students are more inclined to engage in leisure activities such as shopping, recreation, and dining, whereas students working more than 20 hours per week are significantly more likely to prioritize work-related activities. The nested logit model presents similar trends but with a notable difference. Students working long hours are even less likely to engage in shopping compared to multinomial logic model. The mixed logic model provides a more flexible approach to understanding activity choices, activity type choices by accounting for individual specific variations in preferences. Similar to other models, distance, cost, and time negatively impact activity participation, meaning that higher travel costs and longer times make students less likely to choose certain activities. However, the mixed logic model reveals that cost sensitivity is higher than in the multinomial logic model and indicate that students' responses to price variations differ based on personal characteristics. The model also highlights that full-time students are significantly less likely to visit restaurants, capturing variations in individual time constraints and lifestyle choices. Additionally, students with multiple vehicles at home are more likely to engage in recreational activities, emphasizing the role of vehicle access in shaping activity participation. This is the model output of dynamic discrete choice model. This slide highlights the key findings from a dynamic discrete choice model on students' first trip choices. Full-time students are less likely to visit their usual work location or engage in recreation, business meetings. The number of dependents plays a significant role as students with more children tend to participate in fewer activities. International students show a preference for going to their usual work location or TA and RA work, but are less likely to engage in recreational activities. Similarly, students working more than 20 hours per week are significantly more inclined to attend business meetings while reducing their participation in recreational activities. Male students aged 18 to 45 are more likely to visit their usual work location but are less inclined to attend TA and other work. Students attending urban institutions tend to prioritize TA or RA work and dining out at restaurants while engaging less in shopping. On the other hand, students attending suburban institutions are generally less likely to participate in recreational activities. This slide highlights travel factors and demographics influence second trip choices. Similar to first trip, distance, time, and cost negatively impact second trip decisions, reducing the likelihood of additional travel. Demographic factors play a crucial role, while individuals having more dependents being less likely to engage in shopping and errands. International students are less likely to participate in social activities, while students working over 20 hours per week tend to engage less in recreational activities and family visits. Full-time students prioritize their usual work location for second trips. Additionally, students attending urban institutions to engage in health, personal care, and TA or RA work. This is the model outcome of dynamic discrete mixed choice model. I will just show the output here and talk about the key findings in the next slide. So this slide shows the dynamic discrete mixed choice model result of students activity preferences, and how travel factors and demographics influence their first trip choices. Work-related activities such as TA or RA work and usual work locations are prioritized over leisure and social activities like shopping, recreation, and dining at restaurants are less preferred, with recreation and restaurants visits being the least likely as a first trip. Travel factors such as distance, time, and cost negatively impact all activity choices, reducing the likelihood of engagement in non-essential trips. Demographic influences reveal that full-time students are more likely to attend meetings than visit recreational areas. International students prefer work-related activities over social ones, while students working over 20 hours per week prioritize business meetings over recreation due to time constraints. Male students of age between 18 to 45 tend to visit work locations rather than leisure spots. Lastly, students from urban institutions and uh, uh, students from urban institutions are less likely to visit shopping and restaurant locations compared to those from suburban institutions. This dynamic discrete mixed choice model outcome reveals how individuals plan their second trips based on their first trip. Work-related first trips often lead to another work-related trip or errands, while shopping trips tend to be followed by more shopping, showing habitual behavior. Business meetings are usually followed by additional work trips rather than leisure activities. Travel constraints play a key role as long distances, higher cost, and longer travel time significantly reduce the likelihood of taking a second trip. Demographics also influence trip decisions. For example, students working over 20 hours per week tend to avoid second trips for social or recreational activities due to time limitations, while full-time students are more likely to visit their usual work location. Individuals with dependent children limit additional shopping and work trips, while international students prioritize structured activities like work or study over social or shopping trips. This table compares the performance of the multinomial logic model, nested logic model, and mixed logic model for a two-trip tour, and dynamic discrete choice model and dynamic discrete mixed choice model for the three-trip tour. The rho squared value of a multinomial logic model, nested logic model, and mixed logic model are between 0 to 1 and close to 0.4, suggest a good fit. The multinomial logic model outperforms the mixed logic model outperforms multinomial logic model and nested logic model in terms of rho square because it allows preference heterogeneity and overcomes the limitations of multinomial logic model and nested logic model. The rho squared values of dynamic discrete choice model and dynamic discrete mixed choice model also suggest good fit. The DDMCM outperforms DDCM because it enhances decision making by individual level preference heterogeneity.
Nisha, you have about 2 minutes left. Oh, so you're at the end of the
Yeah, I'm about to
Yes,
finish.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, to conclude, this study analyzes student activity choices in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area using tour-based models. Choices influenced by age, job status, and school location, that is urban versus suburban. Key contribution is mixed logic model within dynamic discrete choice framework. Future studies can expand study to a broader student subset and also can include more explanatory variables for better insights of the travel behavior of post-secondary students. Thank you. Thank you for hearing my presentation.
Thank you. So there's a question in the chat box. Do you want to answer quickly before you go to the second presentation? Nisha, there's a question in the chat box. Can you see?
Yes, I'm looking into
Oh.
it. Thank you for the permission. No, this research was not actually done in collaboration with a planning agency, and so far there are no plans for its implication right now. And what is the second question?
What are the main challenges to get adoption by practitioners? Nisha, you are muted. Are you...
So,
we can't hear you.
So I think the main challenges for the practitioner to do the dynamic discrete choice model is that it's a bit difficult to do the modeling in it's a bit difficult to do the econometric modeling code in the Gauss software or any other software that someone is using, because for some cases, for example, we have used a two-trip and three-trip tour based model, but if someone uses more than that, actually, if someone uses five trip tour or six trip tours using dynamic discrete choice models, the code becomes very long, and the trees and the nodes become and there becomes a lot of combinations for the trips. So the computational difficulty is there for doing the dynamic discrete choice or tour-based model for the practitioners. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Nisha, you have another presentation. So can you try to keep it a little bit shorter since we're a little bit scheduled? Thanks.
Yes. Give me 1 minute to share the presentation.
Sure.
So this is my second presentation for today of my research called Navigating Rural Mobility, Evaluating Student Transportation Mode Choices and the Impact of Bicycle Infrastructure in College Towns. I want to focus on post-secondary students' travel behavior in rural USA college towns. As of now, there are some limitations in existing studies. There are not enough studies on post-secondary students' travel behavior in rural college towns. This leaves a gap in understanding their mobility patterns. Single occupant vehicles dominate travel choices, yet few studies have explored policies that encourage students to adopt more sustainable and active transportation options. Additionally, there is a lack of advanced mathematical models that combine revealed preference and stated preference data to analyze mode choices effectively. To address these gaps, this study developed a joint RPSP survey to investigate the key factors influencing students' mode choice decisions in rural college towns. The RPSP survey was designed using a deficient experimental design, which is a state-of-the-art method for generating precise and efficient experimental data. The SP survey was used to understand how students would react to different biking conditions in hypothetical scenarios. The survey explored several key factors, including various types of bike lanes, carbon dioxide emissions, weather conditions, etc. I designed the SP survey using engine software package and adopted a deficient approach. Few prior studies showed that deficient design outperforms the traditional orthogonal design. Doing experimental design in engine requires writing the utility equation for each alternative. It is required to use parameter values either from existing literature or from a small-scale survey. I took the initial parameters from literature and conducted a pilot survey. A model was then developed for mode choice using the dataset to estimate the prior parameter values. The re-estimated parameter values was replaced the initial parameter values, and the experimental design was updated accordingly. After using the estimated parameters from the pilot survey, I got a lower D error and S estimate. The D error is an overall measurement of a promising experimental design. I got 6 different scenarios from the experimental design. This table is a sample stated preference survey. The RP survey design focused on understanding real-world travel behaviors among students in rural college towns in Virginia. I designed the whole survey in an online platform named Question Pro. Later on, I hired Dynata, a market research company, to collect data from 14 rural college towns. The survey was approved under IRB number 21538. This is a sample structure of an RP survey in Question Pro. The survey included an eligibility verification step that ensured the participants were at least 18 years old and resided in the study area. This graph presents the mode share distribution in the revealed preference survey, where driving alone was the preferred mode. This graph shows the mode share pattern of all 6 scenarios where drive alone was the highest mode again. I used 2 modeling techniques to know the travel behavior of students in a rural college town. Joint RPSP MNL is the first one. Revealed preference data alone reflects existing behavior but cannot predict responses to future changes. While SP data alone may not fully align with real-world decision-making, the joint model handles this together. The scale parameter adjusts the differences in variability between RP and SP data and makes the predictions more realistic. These are the equations for the joint RPSP MNL model. This is the output of joint RPSP MNL. I will skip to the key findings. From the RP part of the model, driving is the most dominant mode. Public transit usage is limited, likely because of service availability, but part-time students use public transit more than full-time students. Women and students who take multiple trips per day tend to drive. On the other hand, the SP part of the model reveals opportunities for change. It shows that protected bike lanes increase biking frequency, hill terrain reduces biking choices, distance remains a key barrier to choosing cycling and public transit among students. This is the joint RPSP mixed logic model outcome. I will continue to the key finding. So in the RP part of the model, students predominantly drive influenced by cost, distance, and the number of trips per day. Public transit is more common among part-time students and those with fewer vehicles. Women prefer auto passenger more. In the SP part of the model, it shows that protected bike lanes increase biking preferences, but public transit remains less attractive. Parking availability during peak hours also impacts decision making. The rho squared values are between 0 to 1 for both models. RPSP MNL shows a good fit, and RPSP mixed logic outperforms RPSP MNL, and it shows a very good fit because it allows preference heterogeneity that leads to improved explanatory power. So this is the conclusion. The mixed RPSP logic model outperforms the standard MNL model by capturing heterogeneity. Factors like cost, distance, gender, and employment status significantly impact mode choice. Future work can expand geographical areas and include more explanatory variables to know more about the travel behavior of students' pattern in rural college towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. Let's see if any questions. We can take maybe one question. Okay, if there's no question. Oh, so there's one question. May I kindly know any main takeaway you think is more important when you conduct the pilot survey? Nisha, are you still with us?
Yes. What behavior insights? Which one is the question?
The last question. Oh, sorry.
May I kindly know the main take or I think my supervisor has answered the question. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? If no more, we can proceed to the last speaker. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And our last presenter is Dr. Anna Luisa Disa. Is a research fellow at the University of Melbourne, where she recently completed her PhD in transport. Her research focused on the intersection of time use and travel behavior, with a particular interest in how travel-based and out-of-trip activities shape individuals' travel choices. So let's welcome the last presenter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay,
Yes,
can you
yes.
see it?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. Today I'll be presenting one of the papers from my PhD thesis. So this paper is titled How Useful Can Travel Time Be? Modeling the relationships between travel-based and out-of-trip activities. So I'm Anna, I'm the first author, and I made this paper in collaboration with my supervisors, Dr. Patricia Lavieri and Dr. Jacek Polak, as well as a collaboration with Dr. David Palmer from the University of Leeds. So I investigate travel time use, which can be defined as the act of conducting activities while traveling, such as like work while traveling. And travel time use can have multiple implications for both travel behavior and time use patterns. So for instance, for travel behavior, if individuals wish to conduct activities while traveling, they might have preferences for certain travel modes, particularly those modes where they can travel as passengers, for example. This is a main hypothesis in the literature. Secondly, travel time use could also impact in decreasing the resistance to travel longer journeys, which translates into people being having lower value of travel time savings. Travel time use can impact time use patterns, particularly if people transfer traditionally out-of-trip activities into the journey in order to release time for activities outside of the journey. We call this behavior activity transfer. This is a special case of travel time use that will be important in this study. However, there are multiple research gaps in the literature. Firstly, travel time use has been investigated primarily in isolation from the broader time use context. And when previous studies investigated or considered time use patterns, they primarily focused on what we call activity envelope, so activities that are performed immediately before, during, and after the trip. Lastly, there is also depth of knowledge in regards to the time allocation component of travel-based activities, especially considering this new behavior dimension of activity transfer. So considering these gaps, this study aims to investigate the relationship among out-of-trip and travel-based activities, and we have three specific objectives. Firstly, we will investigate complementarity and substitution relationships between travel-based and out-of-trip activities of the same type, considering mandatory maintenance and discretionary activities. Secondly, we investigate how activity transfer, so this behavior of transferring activities into the journey to release time outside of the journey, how it affects the choice and time allocation to travel-based activities, and whether it moderates these complementarity and substitution relationships between travel-based and out-of-trip activities. The last objective is to identify some heterogeneity, so identify factors influencing the choice and time allocation to both travel-based and out-of-trip activities. To undertake this study and achieve these goals, we implemented the following modeling framework, so an extended multiple discrete continuous choice model, or EMDC. The EMDC model was developed quite recently by David Palmer, who is one of the co-authors in this paper, with Stefan Hess. So as a multiple discrete continuous model, the EMDC enables us to understand the discrete and the continuous component of choices. So the choice of out-of-trip and travel-based activities, and the continuous component refers to the time allocation to these activities. The extension component, which are quite important for this study, is that the EMDC allows for capturing multitasking, particularly through excluding the need of having an observed budget. And secondly, which is the most important one, is that it enables capturing substitution and complementarity relationships between pairs of inside goods. So the data we used comes from an online survey with a representative sample of the adult population living in Greater Melbourne and Geelong in Australia, and it's representative in terms of age, gender, and income. The post-process sample size was of around 1,300 respondents, which is above the minimum required sample size of 900 responses. So how we collected travel-based and out-of-trip activities data. For travel-based activities, we collected the choice, time allocation, and the activity transfer status of activities that were conducted during the most recent outbound and inbound journeys for the participant main trip purpose. So for instance, if the person was going to work and returning for work, we collected information for both trips. For out-of-trip activities, we conducted an activity travel diary in which we collected the time allocated to different out-of-trip activities that occurred during the same day when the individuals took the journeys of interest, so the outbound and inbound journeys of interest. So this is our conceptual framework. Concerning the inside goods or inside activities of our model, we have 3 out-of-trip activities: mandatory, maintenance, and discretionary activities. And we have the same for travel-based activities, but we disaggregated them into transferred and non-transferred. It's worth noting, as I mentioned before, is that activity transfer was defined by the individual and not by the analyst of the study. So we have, in addition to mandatory maintenance and discretionary activities, we also have travel-based sleeping and no travel time use, so the third time people spend doing nothing while traveling. The outside goods of our model are out-of-trip sleeping and time spent on journeys other than the journeys of interest in our study. As explanatory variables, we have social demographics and psychosocial characteristics, which goes in the utility functions of both out-of-trip and travel-based activities. And for travel-based activities, we additionally consider the travel context variables such as mode choice, travel companionship, and also information and communication technology data. So, for instance, whether people would carry any electronic device while traveling. So now moving to the results. So the first part, we analyzed the base utility and satiation parameters and also aligning that with the descriptive statistics of the inside goods of interest. So if I can summarize these findings, is that firstly, activity transfer is less likely to be selected compared to non-transferred activities. However, once activity transfer is selected, people tend to allocate more time to them. Concerning activity type, we identified that among travel-based activities, so while traveling, people tend to engage more in discretionary tasks compared to maintenance and mandatory activities. But this tendency is inverted for out-of-trip activities. So outside of the journey, people tend to spend less time in discretionary tasks. The second part of the results refers to the complementarity and substitution relationship, which is a key part of our study. We've identified positive relationships between out-of-trip mandatory with travel-based mandatory activities, so for both transferred and non-transferred, and the same occurred for maintenance activities. For discretionary activities, we identified a negative relationship, so there is a substitution relationship between out-of-trip discretionary and travel-based discretionary activities. There are like differences in terms of the magnitude of these estimates depending on whether the activity was transferred or non-transferred. So if I can summarize the results here, whether the parameter of relationship is positive or negative depends on the type of activity, but activity transfer seems to influence the strength of these relationships, so it acts as a moderator. When there is a substitution relationship, it tends to strengthen this relationship, but when there is a complementarity relationship, activity transfer tends to weaken it. So what can also we have as takeaway from these complementarity relationship is that concerning like mandatory and maintenance activities is that travel time use could be being used to accommodate access demands and needs arising from these high priority activities as maintenance and mandatory activities are. But in the case of substitution relationship for discretionary tasks, it tells us that travel time use could be being used to alleviate time poverty associated with discretionary activities that do not have space in people's schedule. The last part of it refers to the effects of explanatory variables. And here, just to add that, like we are showing just a collection of the results. And also to add that the explanatory variables also allows us to understand more a bit these complementarity and substitution relationships. So for example, based on the average marginal effects results, we identified that people aged between 18 to 44, so Gen Z and millennials, they tend to allocate more time to mandatory activities outside of the journey. And while traveling, they tend to allocate mandatory activities not transferred from outside of the journey. So activities that won't release time outside of the journey. So there is like a big complementarity relationship between them. On the other hand, they tend to allocate less time to out-of-trip discretionary activities, but while traveling, they tend to transfer discretionary activities outside of the journey into the journey. So again, it's showing like complementarity and substitution relationship. So that is, they're accommodating excess demands for mandatory tasks and alleviating leisure scarcity in the case of among young people. The following results have more implications for transport practice and policy. So we identified that a psychosocial factor called preferences for faster journeys, which is a measure of the disutility of travel time. The psychosocial factor is linked to higher probability of engaging and allocating more time to discretionary activities not transferred from outside of the journey. So this is likely a strategy to offset the disutility of travel time. And it tells us that these discretionary activities, they likely don't have a strong relationship with out-of-trip time use for the case of people with preferences for faster journeys. For the travel context, we found that people traveling by public transport, they were more likely to engage in travel-based mandatory activities and discretionary tasks. And in addition, if they were traveling by rail, they had an additional time allocated to travel-based mandatory activities transferred from outside of the journey. So summing up, like the main takeaways from this study is that firstly, our findings support that travel time use is linked to the broader time use context, and importantly, beyond the activity envelope. So for instance, considering a whole day of activities, travel time use could be linked to these activities, not only the pre and post-trip tasks. Secondly, our travel time use is a multidimensional behavior that can serve for multiple purposes. So for instance, it can decrease disutility of travel time, especially among those who dislike traveling. It could accommodate demands arising from high priority tasks like mandatory and maintenance activities, especially among time-pressured people. And it could also alleviate the scarcity of leisure and social activities in people's daily schedule. So further reinforcing the relevance of framing travel time use as an integral part of the broader time use context. Lastly, we see that there are implications for transport policy and practice as well. So there is a need for tailored transport intervention to cater to the time use needs of specific population segments. So that can further facilitate the engagement in activities that people wish to conduct while traveling. So thank you very much for your attention. If you are interested in this research, we have recently published a review paper about the effects of travel time use on activity travel behavior. And tomorrow I'll be presenting a study at BTR called Modeling the Effects of Travel Time Use on Mode Choice and the Value of Travel Time Savings. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Now we can open the floor for questions.
Okay, we'll stop sharing.
Any questions for the last presentation? Okay, so maybe I can ask the last question. So it's a quite interesting topic. I'm wondering what is the main recommendation for maybe transport planning perspective based from your study?
Yeah, I think there are some population segments that would benefit from specific measures. So for instance, young people, they were more likely to engage in work or study activities or traveling. So potentially for them having a travel environment where they could more easily engage in these activities could be beneficial. That could, for instance, translate into lower value of travel time savings and so forth, or even increase public transport, for example, could be more desirable if it has an environment that enables such activities.
Thank you. That's quite interesting finding. If there's no more question, maybe we can end the session today. Thank you all for joining this engaging session, for the excellent presentation and thoughtful questions. And big thanks to all of you for sharing the research and the audience for your participation. So please enjoy the rest of conference. I will see you around.